thanks for the introduction, Rami. Left me a bit lost for words, and thank you very much for the way you introduced me. There was no need to. We've known each other a good few years in real life, in the office, in the reasonable refreshments afterwards, online in various formats and forums. So thank you very much to you and the other organisers for letting me get involved. And so this is what I'm bringing, Windows passwords cracking for the blue team. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on me. I'm easy to find, easy to contact. If anyone wants to chat about this or anything else I've done after this presentation, then feel free to get in touch, and I will share this deck if it's of any use to anyone. Let's try and find out why it's not moving on. And I saw this the other day. And security is a very serious business, but I try not to take myself too seriously. So I threw this in just for a laugh. Now, normally, giving up on stage, you can see the reactions from the audience, or you're on a Zoom call and people have enabled cameras and you can see them. But now I'm just talking to my laptop, which is quite a strange experience. So I'm going to go through three areas. Automation of the lab environment, touch on why I believe that is so good, and then how I do it. There are lots of ways to do it. I will not get into a fight about good and bad ways. And then why I think this is important when it comes to being challenged by external audit on your password complexity rules, and finish up with touching on password cracking when the minimum length is set at 12 characters, because if you run a clean environment, you should not be popping blank SAs or admins or password ones. I mean, plenty of people do all the time, but when you have a very well maintained environment, you shouldn't be popping those, but you can still recover lots of passwords if you have everything that it takes. So, automation, and why I think it is so important, so important for blue team defenders and security. Everyone who plays with tech in general, but the blue team, SOC managers, the training of the practicing, the testing things before you use them, automation, easy to rerun, obviously. I will end up talking to the points quite a bit on these slides, which I don't always do in a presentation. Sometimes I'll throw up a photograph to remind me of something, but here I will be talking a lot to what is written on the slides. Automation, easy to rerun. You just, there might be a minus force option that deletes all the temporary files or the corrupt files or the last time you run it files, and off you go again. Easy to rerun. Consistent. If you have the right constraints in place about which repo you pull down, which package from, and things like that, you will get the same thing on Monday as you will on Tuesday, as you will on Friday. And if you have a record of what was in that automation, you can recreate it in 10 years' time. So consistency. Now this one, knowledge gained through learning how to do it. That's why I brought this topic to your HAVOC conference, and the jokes we make about next clicking. There are so many. I would like to say probably 60% of people getting started in IT is next, finish, and no understanding of what that install wizard did. Or what the tools that it calls did, what was packed in the installer, anything. If you learn automation for the rerunning and the consistency, then you're going to really learn what's going on, and you're not going to be a next clicker. Now, some other advantages. Once you've learned it and you've written it up and you've demonstrated that it runs then you can delegate it to someone who hasn't had to do all the investment in learning. If you manage a team, manage a department, and you have someone with these skills working for you, or you do it yourself because you're the kind of person who thinks you have to do everything yourself, once you've got it to a point you like, you can delegate it, and whether someone is creating a lab on their laptop or whether someone is pushing new environments for developers or pre-prod, it's easy to delegate because it's so repeatable. And then the next step from that is easy to build it into self-service portals. And if you want to practice, play around with doing self-service portals yourself, I'd suggest you have a look at Rundeck. Open source project, Java under the covers, but it's a web front end with roles, responsibilities that goes off and does things. If the topic interests you, go and have a look at it. Now, the way that I've done it for today, Packer, Vagrant, VirtualBox, PowerShell, none of those cost me any money. They're all mature. They're all stable for building a little lab on a decent piece of kit. They do the job well. PowerShell, because it's going to be a Windows environment. Now, these tools, you may have played with them. You may not care for them. You may have others that you like, or you may not know anything about them. I find them simple to learn, consistent, useful, and I'm happy with them. That's why I brought them here today. I have worked with Puppet, Chef, Salt, Ansible, CF Engine, and PowerShell scripts and Bash scripts. I have tried to roll out config stabilization using all of these things. My favorite out of that list is Salt, and then followed by Ansible. If automation is something you'd like to see how other people have done it well, then I would suggest getting a look at some of these projects. Some of them will get a mention in a bit as well. Detection Lab spins up Splunk, a couple of Windows machines, a bit of web forwarding, and it gives you an environment to detonate tools and see what was written to the logs. Detection Lab, that should read ELK, is replacing Splunk. Automated AD setup we'll see later, because that's a classic why build it yourself when someone's already built something very good. When you get into Windows with Packer and Vagrant, HashiCorp guides, you're going to be in and out of them until you've got what you like. And once you've got what you like, then you just tweak it, hand it around your team, use it for different projects. Then Terraform, not going to touch on Terraform today, but these were really interesting articles that, because I'm reading and sharing links all the time, I pop them in here. If the subject interests you, then you might want to read around it. That's Terraform for Red Team by Rastmouse, Terraform for Red Team by iRed, and I love this because it's so hot right now. No, just a few days ago, a very interesting article from the NDSec team from South Manchester in the UK. You probably read their blogs on lots of red teaming stuff, and now that they teach it, they've written this blog about the decisions they've made in automating their lab setup. From a security manager in an enterprise who can't get people to agree on standard configs and things, the idea of being able to tweak your gold images using scripts and command line should be great for people who like to have their virtual infrastructure nice and clean and up to date, and especially relevant for a non-persistent VDI infrastructure, where if you get the opportunity to bring non-persistent VDI infrastructure into your organization, it is a fantastic way to reduce the risk in general user population. Non-persistent means when you reboot it, that that snapshot is destroyed and you go back to a gold image. So if you can use command line tools to keep your gold images up to date, or pass them into automated testing to prove that the latest patches are going to allow your the way your business works to carry on no problem, then it's all good. But non-persistent VDI infrastructure, fantastic way to sleep at night. Because if someone manages to detonate something in that infrastructure, it's very difficult for them to get a hook in that stays in. Not impossible, but very difficult. Whilst we're on the topic of compliance engines for security, if you wanted to do some more reading on that, there's a couple that I actually tested and rolled out. The one on the left is a very small organization. The one on the right is used by Adobe to clean up their environment. 40, 50,000 servers all checking in against secure configs. So it touches on the same subject of automation, but they use they've got their own way of doing it. It started off as a SALT project and has grown into something else. It's got events-based processing, and also the Hubble project is amazing. But not strictly what I was here to talk about. I just like to share things that people might find it interesting. And every now and again throw in a quote. This one is this is going back to that point that if you don't know what the tools do, you don't know if it's the right tool for the job. If you're a next clicker, then you get everything you deserve. And that's what this was put in. It's the anti-next clicker quote. So as I laid out, I've gone for Packer Vagrant VirtualBox. No cost, Windows 64-bit, very useful, well supported, and lots of other projects use them, so you can read the config files and understand how other people have tackled things. Because there are many ways to tackle an unintended install of Windows. There are many ways to then deploy what you want into it. So it's very, if you like this subject, you get into it. It's interesting reading other people's Packer JSONs and Vagrant files. The screenshots you're going to see today, I use a shell that isn't PowerShell, isn't CMD, isn't Cygwin. It's the Commander shell, and I also was operating on the D. A lot of what I have prepared here and other versions of it are going to be pushed up to GitHub soon. So yes, my Packer and my Vagrant. On the right hand side there, I just want to draw your attention to Packer cache. So in a Packer config file, you can tell it where to get the setup ISO. So whether you're doing CentOS, Debian, Kali, Windows 2016, Windows 2019, if there is an ISO online that you want to download, you can put it in your config file. It'll download it as part of the first run, and then it'll pop it in Packer cache. So it can be the difference between 2 hours to do a build and 15 minutes to do a build. And 15-20 minutes, depending on what outputs you've chosen, can be quite reasonable, which is another thing I love about this. So the Packer cache is very important. The Packer Win, looking again at the image on the right, Win 2019 base image JSON is a file I've created for building a Windows 2019 server the way I like it done. The scripts folder holds the things that are going to either be passed into the image or, as the name floppy suggests, attached to the machine when it fires up during the preparation phase at this stage. So Packer takes an ISO, takes some things you want to do to it, and builds the box, then outputs it as an OVF or other things. And we're going to come on to that next. And so the floppy disk has the auto unattend. So you have to really understand those, and that's why I say there's lots of different ways to build these. So the JSON that makes up a Packer config has 4 sections, and it doesn't allow for commenting, but there is a trick where you put custom variables at the top. If you have the variables section as the first bit you declare, then you can put custom variables at the top of that, and you can leave yourself or your colleagues comments as custom variables. There isn't one in the file I'm going to show you now, but there are on the other files on my hard drive. So there we see in the middle of that the ISO URL that is for the 64-bit eval of 2019. The SHA-1 and the checksum, if you leave those out, Packer doesn't always run. It likes to force you to know that you are relying on something that you have provided the correct checksum. I like about 8 gig of memory when running a setup for Windows, and this will go into a 40 gig drive. Builders, not going to go through all this. You know, if it's something that interests you, you'll play around with it, you'll learn it. But the last little bit, VBox manage, a way to adjust memory and CPUs of what you're going to build. The shutdown command, very, very important for things to clean up properly and to move on to the next stage. Floppy, very important for being able to attach things that the setup DVD or CD in the old days will be looking for. And WinRM is how it's going to communicate in there. Provisioners are things that are going to run once the OS is up. So the first bit is going to be the answer file to get setup kicked off. Then when Packer knows that the OS is up, it's going to log in with the admin password that you've given it and start running these. So it's obvious from the naming convention. And these are tried and tested ways of doing things. But as I said before, there's lots of different ways to do things. So you may put them in a different order. You may create more. You may create different things inside these PowerShells. You'll get them from different projects. And then post-processor. This, you don't always need one of these, but I included a Vagrant output, because Vagrant puts everything it needs to know about a box in a box file. And keep input artifact true means it doesn't destroy the OVF on the way there. If space was a problem and you always were happy with the output, you would set keep input artifact to true, and it wouldn't leave a VM lying around. But this is a 2 terabyte D drive, so I'd rather be able to fire it up and have a dig around inside it. So the text file, easy to read, easy to pass around. The next thing to do is just run Packer build. If you do Packer build force, it destroys any old ones that might be sitting there. But Packer build, if you're not downloading the ISO, takes about 25 minutes at those settings. A little bit longer when you tell it to then do a Vagrant output. And that was the start of it, getting stuck in. So the post processor does the Vagrant. It creates a boxes folder in this directory, and it outputs a box config file. So I got 2 different ways to launch these VMs from that one command, Packer build my JSON file. And on the right, as we look at it, the small window at the bottom, that's ls-l. Yeah, I know that's Unix config, but this is why I use the commander shell. Shows you the setup that you can load straight into VirtualBox to have a dig around in, as opposed to the box you're going to pass to Vagrant. So then all we have to do is one line, command line, could be written into a shell script, could be written into a shell script that was called easy button, that would create directories, move in and out of them, and run these lines. Vagrant box add, the box we just created, and give it a name. And what this is doing is it's putting it into your local registry, so that anywhere on this machine, if I want to bring up a 2019 machine, I just create a folder, drop a vagrant file in it, type vagrant up, and I will get this machine if the vagrant file calls my base, because it looks in the registry of what I put in there. So I prefer this method to downloading things from public repositories or downloading things from GitHub vagrant files. I prefer to build it myself, store it in my local registry, and then vagrant up, bang, I've got things the way I configure them. And if I want 25 Windows 2019 boxes, and this machine can probably handle that, I just create, and if I wanted them all for separate projects, I'd create 25 folders, copy the vagrant file into them all, and launch vagrant up in each folder. You can create vagrant files that launch more than one VM. So you can put together whole networks. That's what Detection Lab and Detection Lag Out do. They'll fire up 3 or 4 boxes, but all from one vagrant file. There's a slightly different, you just read up on how to do it if that's what you need to do. But for this exercise, extracting hashes, didn't need to do it, just need one box. So the vagrant file that was called, another one of my favorites is this EM editor. You might be a big fan of Notepad++, but the Notepad++ is an excellent tool, but likes to open the whole file. EM editor will only open the front of the file. So if your file is many gigs of data, say you found 79 gigs of usernames and passwords on a torrent site, you can't open that in Notepad. You would head the top off it, but you can open it in EM editor because it'll just start at the front, and that's this is the free version. Nice. So what this is doing is incredibly simple. It's just going into my registry, getting my base 2019 that we created 25 minutes ago, and it's going to refer to it itself as ADDC, and it's going to add a second NIC that on the outside, so the host gives it 192.168.38.102. So it creates a host-only network with those details and attaches it as a second NIC. That way, with things like a domain controller that want a fixed IP address, you know that you have a native NIC and a fixed NIC. It's just helpful in those terms. So the first command for vagrant was to add it into the registry. Now, any folder I go into and type vagrant up that has a vagrant file in will try and execute the vagrant file. And when you execute the vagrant file I've just showed you, it turns on the Windows 2019 box with 2 NICs. Now, I would have loved to have gone down the rabbit hole of completely automating the adding of a DNS server, the promoting of a member server to a domain controller, but there's someone who has already done those things, and then creating some users, creating some OUs, creating some security settings, attaching them to the OUs using GPO, and it's this project. 4 years old, was running against 2012 at the time, but is still a fantastic resource if you want to bring up a hardened domain controller to test your red team skills against. So it is one logical myth automated AD setup. And it comes with a link to YouTube that shows you the whole thing running in about 12 minutes. So that is multiple reboots, asks you for a better password because it has password policies that apply to different parts of the directory tree. I would recommend, if you're going to get into automating a hardened domain controller, you start with this and then make it your own. Now I'm going to move on to credential dumping. This is a hacker conference with red team presentations. There are many ways to steal NTLM hashes that you're then going to reverse with cracking tool. My all-time favorite, and there are a few reasons for this, is using the built-in tool for backing up the database behind AD. One of the reasons is because I'm a security manager and I'm a corporate. Yes, I've got my interest in offensive skills, but I'm corporate. I have to take changes to release managers and change boards and get signed off by IT directors, changes that they look responsible and ethical and corporate. So for my audit process, I get somebody else to run commands in a Windows built-in tool and then pass the file to me. So we split it. 2 people are involved in the process. And that way, it's executed at a certain time of the month by a certain individual to get the hashes out, which auditors don't mind. The SOC manager doesn't mind. If he knows that on this day, this account is going to run this tool, it can be eliminated from anyone's inquiries. And that's why I like this one. So another so hot right now is MITRE, has been for many years. Just looking at the time, I could talk about this for days. Looking at the time, I am going to motor on. So using NT DSUtil is my preferred way of getting hashes out when you're doing it for legit purposes, when you're the security manager asking the head of infrastructure to provide him with these for an audit. And there's a fantastic write-up of all sorts of different ways, including this there. Now, this was the place I got it from originally, the Dianac blog. And the reason for that is once you've got the database out, it needs a bit of repair and a bit of work on. But the Dianac produced a tool to do that for you. That's a Windows binary that you can get from GitHub, like that. So if you are completely automating this, say for an exercise to run to get hashes out and give to someone else to see if they can as part, or just all sorts of things. That I think there could be a training exercise where player A spun up this lab, tweaked what the user passwords that went into the generating of the user account in AD did, then extracted the using these tools and these processes and passed it to player B, who had to reverse them, who could also have the same environment that tweaked the passwords that the users were choosing, and sent them back to player A. So because it's a command line tool, and you can script that, you can pass it in, and you can pass it in like Q space Q is to quit 2 levels of the tool, and you have to tell it what database to pick up and where to save it out. You can script all of that. So this whole thing could be fully automated from a setup ISO to some random users in there to this tool that is on the screen here, repairing the data that came out in the last page. Now, a little bit on password complexity rules. I'm just seeing some red marks because sorry, just check it. So I thought someone was shouting at me to shut up and get out of here. So, joke about password lengths. Just my opinions. External audits. You've got your collectors who run around following the rules. There's an F missing off process. Then you've got your audit managers and the smart people who run things. And you've got partners who sign off on things. And you've got big partners who just recruit other partners. So it doesn't look like pyramid selling at all. EY, Deloitte, KPMG, PY. Having said that, Out-of-the-box settings for passwords are usually something like this. So complexity rules. And then they normally add a password history, a maximum age, and maybe a length of 8 or 9. And that has been the teaching for 20 years now. The new guidelines, and I could talk for ages about why we've arrived at this, but basically if you're rotating passwords, you're making bad choices, is only change your password if you think it's known by someone else. So I opted for minimum length 12, which is going to go to 14, history of 1, so you can't have the one you've just had, and only change it if you think someone else knows it. There's an N missing out, I think. And UK's NCSC have written about this, and they talked about longer passwords being 3 random words. In my user training, I sent people to correcthorsebatterystable.net and told them not to use the password correcthorsebatterystable, because it's obviously in every hacking dictionary ever. And that will generate you something. These are easy to remember. There's 2 ways to check if they're picking bad passwords. Filter as they change or audit at some point afterwards. Here's an example of a filter I have used, and I was very happy with it. It's changed a bit since then. I chose to audit at certain points in time. We do quarterlies. I could talk about the history of password cracking, how we started with slow tools and small dictionaries and things, but the way to really motor through is get the latest build of John the Ripper and the latest build of Hashcat, learn how to use them, have some good rules. That line there, good rules, is a discussion of how Not So Secure did an analysis of lots of the popular rule sets and came up with one really good rule, and get some good word lists. And weakpass.com, if you don't know about it, we've heard of breachaware, we've heard of dehashed, we've heard of all sorts, but weakpass.com compile very good word lists for this job. My current favorite is the DCHT pass at 24 gig text file, and those sneakily, I wanted to clean that image up but didn't have the time. Those are the password files I've been using for 20 years, except the ones at the top, the new one. The wider landscape, worth mentioning, raid forums is probably where you'll see the data that loads up in Have I Been Pwned. If you want to see a discussion on the growth and evolution of dictionaries, then that Got Milk's a great blog site. That one from 2011, it was a great point then. Hashes.org, don't know why it says that. I thought I'd deleted that. Great place to look at dumps being reversed, which don't have the usernames in. So if you're just fascinated by the hashes, but that data ends up at weakpass.com. And the blog post behind the rule I was on about was there. And these are real examples from my John Pot that get found. So Winter is Coming, Band of Brothers, Reason to Smile, Small Time Love, Stupid Face. These are real passwords people use, and if I find them during my audit, we set the change password at next login and send them an email to say choose a better password. Had to really rush the end to try and keep to time for the other speakers that may be coming. So time is precious. Thank you for yours.